Hello everyone and welcome back to Liquid Evil Gaming after a bit of an absence with some technical difficulties with Windows 10. My apologies. So we're finally going to get around to the review of the V60 Keyboard Paradise Mini. I opted to go with the Cherry MX Blues on this particular board just because for days where my fingers have about had it, sometimes the greens can be a bit too much for me, and the clears, while I like them, the blues are even a little bit lighter than them. As I've said before, I think I am a scratch baker / run the bakery for a living. So sometimes my hands and fingers have taken a bit of workout during the day and don't have the energy left at the end of the day to use a heavier switch. So, on to the keyboard itself. This is the V60 from Keyboard Paradise. It is a 60% Cherry MX Blue switch in this particular case. And what's a little bit unique about this particular keyboard is it's a dual LED, meaning it has two different color LEDs on the keyboard. You can get either red and blue or red and green. And with the simple hold of the function key and the LED change key, you can go to blue. And then again, back to red. If you do it really quick, you might think that the police are chasing after you for something. So the keyboard itself was $109 US, and it has a plastic case, as you can see here. You've got your 4 rubber feet, 2 at each corner, your dip switches right there. The build quality is fairly solid, but the reason I do have the Poker 3 next to it is I want to make a number of direct comparisons, since the Poker 3 is kind of the de facto go-to for 60% boards, unless you have the money and patience for a gone keyboard. These are kind of your major ones that you'll be looking at. So it is fairly solid, even though it's plastic. Not as solid as the Poker 3, and it does come with ABS keycaps, which is kind of a given usually given the backlit. They are very, very thin. I believe another reviewer had mentioned they were only a millimeter thick, and if you see here, compared to a Vortex PBT double shot, that thickness is quite apparent. I would say it's right about double. So these are some of the thinnest ABS keycaps I have ever typed on, and it is clearly noticeable in the sound the keyboard makes when using it, along with the actual feeling of the typing. Now, it doesn't feel bad to type on, but you can definitely notice the keycaps make a difference. So there's something you may want to consider swapping out down the line. However, that brings us into an issue. Now, I'm not sure if it's because the LED bulbs on this are a little thicker or it's the placement of the LEDs themselves, but as other people have mentioned, unfortunately many thick keycaps do not work on this board because they get caught on the LEDs coming back up and the keys get stuck. So keys as thick as, say, this Vortex PBT double shot will simply not work with this board unless you're willing to modify it and shave down the keys a bit, or shave down the LEDs, which personally I'm not willing to do. So your options of keycaps are going to be a little bit more limited as to what is not overly thick that won't get caught on those LEDs coming back up. But as always, your mileage may vary. I did read about this. I wasn't sure how bad it actually was, but again, I tested it myself, and with the Vortex PBT it was an issue. However, those are particularly thick caps. So aside from that, touring the rest of the board here, here's your USB connector. Again, as I showed on the back, you've got your dip switches, the rubber feet. It's a very thin bezel all around, which is very appreciated. These are compatible with several aluminum cases should you decide to swap out the case, which personally I'm actually considering because typing on the board, while solid for plastic, there's definitely a noticeable difference between this and the Poker. The Poker, when you're typing on it, feels very solid. I mean, literally like a key is installed on the side of a tank. This, by contrast, it feels good, but you can definitely hear and feel a substantial difference between the cases, as you should. But again, remember, there isn't a huge price difference between these two. This in MX Blues, I believe, is about $129, whereas this in MX Blues is about $109. So what you're really paying for in this is the backlit feature, especially the dual LED feature. Now, that said, you're very limited in terms of LED modes here. Really, you've just got your different brightness levels here, as with any LED keyboard, and you can switch between your two colors. But that's really about it. There was a reported breathe mode that was supposed to work with this keyboard. However, it does not. What is supposed to work is if you hold down the function key and hit the LED brightness a 8th time, then the breathe mode is supposed to activate. However, there was a problem with that, and Keyboard Paradise thought they were going to be able to fix it via firmware, but in fact they admitted they cannot, and that it is a fix that would either you would have to send the keyboard back and they would have to replace the board to fix it, or they also offered to give me one of the newer ones coming out, which are going to have double shot keys in them but no backlighting. I actually really like the backlighting on this, so I'm going to keep it. But because of that, they actually offered me some free switches of my choice and a Cherry MX metal keychain as a gift for keeping it just minus that one mode, which wasn't that important to me to begin with. So I thought that was kind of nice on Keyboard Paradise part. But just be aware of that if you were interested in that breathing light mode, that it does not work and there is no way to fix it short of sending it back to Keyboard Paradise. And this was confirmed to me by them via direct email to the company themselves. So do be aware of that. Besides that, I mean, there's not a whole lot to say. It's, you know, your typical 60% board minus the dual LED features, kind of the unique aspect of it. Basically, when comparing this to the Poker 3, you're kind of making the choice of, do I want the supreme build quality from the get-go, which, yes, you could get a aluminum case for the V60 should you so choose, which you have to buy the case, which is a heavy additional expense, and then install it yourself if you're so savvy enough, which would bring the cost of the keyboard up substantially. You figure even $100 for a case, that would bring your price to $209 versus $129 for the Poker 3. So really, if you're considering the V60, comparing it to the Poker 3, your big thing is the backlighting. Do you need backlighting? Do you want backlighting? I always like to have at least one backlit keyboard of any size keyboard that I use constantly, which at the moment is 60%, and I didn't have one of the 60% form factor, so I decided to buy one. It's a nice keyboard. The stock keycaps really are poor at best. They're very thin, very mediocre. The build quality is pretty decent for plastic. There is some flex on the sides if you push it. It is noticeable. Forgive the Irish whiskey here, kind of swaying back and forth, speaking of which. Yeah, don't judge. It's 8:30 in the morning here, but it was a rough night. Hair of the dog and all that. But for the price, I mean, you really are paying for the backlighting. Like I said, the build quality's not bad, so I don't want to knock on it, but it's noticeably lesser than that of the Poker. So you're really paying for the backlighting on this. That, bottom line, is what you're paying for. So if you don't need the backlighting, I would personally recommend the Poker 3 over this keyboard. I really would. It's very noticeable both in typing, feeling, and just in overall, build quality. You can feel it right away. I mean, this keyboard weighs like double what this one does. But if you want the backlighting, this is a decent, affordable option for a 60% board. Like I said, I happen to enjoy the backlighting. Again, dealing with that whole keycap issue is going to be a bit of a concern, so that's a shame, but it is what it is. At $109, it's not bad, but again, and I hate to keep repeating myself, if you don't need that, I would recommend going with the Poker instead. But if you want the backlighting, this is a much more affordable option than, say, having a Gone build or some of the more expensive 60% out there. It does use Cherry stabilizers, For those out there that are curious about that, they are, and this is something I mentioned in the preview when I was unboxing it, they do feel substantially mushier than that of other cherry stabilizers. I'm sure you can even hear that. I mean, granted, the poker I have PBT caps on it, these are ABS, but still, there's quite a bit of a difference here in the stabilizers. Now, I'm not sure if it's because maybe they have landing pads underneath this. I haven't looked. I don't actually see any, but they do feel substantially mushier for cherry stabilizers compared to some of the other ones I've used. Now, granted, cherry stabilizers always feel mushier than Co-Star stabilizers do, but these, even for cherry, do feel substantially mushy. It's only on the bigger modifier keys like Shift and Enter and Delete. Tab is fine, the smaller ones. But you do have to bear that in mind. So if that's something that bothers you, that could be a concern. So for $109, it's a decent little package. If you have to have backlighting or you want backlighting, you certainly could do worse. The build quality, again, is not bad for plastic by any stretch, but pales in comparison to the poker. My overall review of the keyboard would be about a 7 out of 10. It's decent for the money, but there are definitely noticeable lacking things, such as the stock keycaps are very poor in thickness and probably will not last all that long. The stock case, while decently sturdy for plastic, does have a little bit of flex to it, and you can definitely tell. The breathing mode not working as advertised, although Keyboard Paradise was more than willing to work with me on that issue, so I want to be sure to note that. And like I said, it just, you really are paying for the backlighting here. I hate to sound like a broken record, but that really is its killer feature with this one, because as far as build quality, the poker wins hands down without even a remote contest. So if you want the neat little backlighting feature and you don't mind the plastic case, I would say go for it, although try to get it as cheap as you can. Like I said, I paid $109 US for mine with Cherry MX Blues. The Poker 3 is about $129 with $129 US with MX Blues. So it is a pretty decent board, but it does not live up to the Poker in terms of build quality. This one is more about the LED lighting features that you get on the board. So do you have any other questions about the board compared to the Poker or just in general? Any other questions you have about it specifically, concerns, let me know down in the comments section, and I will try to answer them the best that I can. Now, to kind of wrap this up, I'm going to give you a sound sample of typing on this so you can hear what it sounds like, and then do a brief one on the Poker so you can hear the contrast between the ABS keycaps and the plastic case versus PBT caps and the aluminum case. So first we'll do a little bit here on the Keyboard Paradise V60. I can get the mic really close for you. Now that was the Keyboard Paradise V60, and you can kind of pick up that little bit of light plasticky sound, or at least I can. I don't know how well the mic translates it, but you can definitely tell that these are thin ABS caps. By contrast, here is the Poker 3, but it is MX clear, so it's going to sound substantially different anyways. As you can tell, both due to the PBT caps and the aluminum case, the sound is substantially different between the two boards, and I definitely prefer the sound of the Poker, but that's to be expected both due to the PBT caps and the aluminum case. Now granted, these are aftermarket PBT on here now, but the board did come stock with PBT caps just as thick. In fact, these are also Vortex caps. They're just double shot instead of the laser etched that it came with originally. So again, I would give the board about a 7 out of 10 overall. If you need backlighting, you want a 60%, you could definitely do worse. It's not a bad little board. I think the price could be a little cheaper for what it is, but not too bad overall. If you don't need the backlighting, I would probably lean toward the Poker personally. That's my overall opinion of the board itself. What are yours? Do you own one? Do you like it? Have you tried other 60%? What do you think of this particular board compared to other ones in its class? As always, thank you for watching. Be sure to like, comment, rate, and subscribe. Have a good one, everyone.